A 3-second handshake, an instant pregnancy. Two worlds colliding in the most impossible way. What happens when a simple gesture of friendship creates a life no one was prepared for? Dr. James Rivera had always dreamed of meeting life from another planet. As a scientist working at a remote government facility in the Nevada desert, he spent years studying the possibility of alien contact. But nothing could have prepared him for the day when it actually happened. The spacecraft landed on a Tuesday morning, gleaming silver under the hot desert sun. Unlike the movies, there were no explosions or dramatic music. It was quiet, almost peaceful. The ship's door opened slowly and out stepped Zara, the first visitor from another world. She was unlike anything James had ever seen. Her skin had a slight glow to it, shifting between soft blue and purple depending on how the light hit her. She stood about the same height as a human, with features that were both familiar and completely foreign at the same time. Her eyes were larger, more expressive, and they seemed to hold centuries of wisdom despite her appearing relatively young. The facility had prepared for this moment for months. They had protocols, safety measures, and communication devices. But when Zara walked into the laboratory where James worked, all of that careful planning suddenly felt inadequate. She was real. This was actually happening. The first few days were incredible. Zara communicated through a translation device her people had provided. She explained that she came from a planet called Viridian, located in a solar system so far away that even their advanced ships took years to reach Earth. She was an explorer, a scientist like James, sent to learn about humanity and share knowledge between their worlds. James was assigned as her primary contact. His job was to help her understand human culture, show her around the facility, and answer her endless questions about Earth. She was curious about everything. Why did humans eat 3 times a day? Why did they sleep when it got dark? Why did they shake hands when they met? That last question would change everything. On the 7th day of her visit, James was showing Zara how humans greet each other. He explained that a handshake was a sign of friendship and respect. Zara found this fascinating. On her planet, physical contact was rare and carried significant meaning. But she wanted to understand human customs, so she agreed to try. James extended his hand, smiling warmly. Zara hesitated for just a moment, then reached out and placed her hand in his. The touch lasted maybe 3 seconds. Her skin felt slightly cooler than human skin, and there was a faint tingling sensation. Then she suddenly pulled away, her skin flashing bright red. "What's wrong?" James asked, concerned by her reaction. Zara stepped back, looking at her hand like it had betrayed her. She said something in her own language, urgent and worried. The translation device struggled to keep up. "Not possible, cannot be. This is not right." Within an hour, Zara collapsed. The medical team rushed her to the facility's hospital wing. Human doctors and the Viridian medical officer who had accompanied her worked frantically to figure out what was wrong. Her body temperature was rising. Her bioluminescent skin was flickering erratically. She was clearly in distress. It took another 6 hours before they discovered the truth. The Viridian medical officer delivered the news that nobody could believe. Zara was pregnant. Somehow, impossibly, that brief handshake had resulted in conception. The genetic material had combined instantly, and a hybrid life was already forming inside her. James felt the room spin around him. This couldn't be real. They had barely touched. It was just a handshake, a simple gesture of friendship. How could this have happened? But the science was clear, even if it was incomprehensible. Zara's species had evolved on a dying planet where their population was critically low. Over millions of years, their bodies had developed an extreme reproductive response. When exposed to compatible genetic material from any source, their system could trigger immediate conception as a survival mechanism. On Viridian, they had developed drugs and protocols to suppress this response. But Zara hadn't taken those precautions because she never imagined a simple human touch could be compatible with her biology. When Zara woke up and learned what had happened, her reaction was explosive. Her skin turned dark red, a color James would later learn meant fury. She demanded to see him immediately. When he entered her room, she was sitting up in the medical bed connected to various monitoring devices, and her eyes were blazing with anger. "You did this to me," she said, her voice shaking. "You have destroyed everything," James tried to explain. He hadn't known. Nobody had known. It was an accident, a terrible biological coincidence that neither species could have predicted. But Zara wasn't interested in his explanations. On her planet, pregnancy was a sacred choice that took years of preparation. Couples had to go through extensive rituals and ceremonies. The actual conception process took months of careful biological synchronization, and the pregnancy itself lasted nearly a decade. Now she was carrying a child she never chose to have, created in seconds through an innocent gesture. Worse, the doctors estimated that this hybrid pregnancy would last only months, not years. Her body wasn't designed for such rapid development. Every day of this pregnancy could be dangerous. The facility went into lockdown. News of what happened spread through the staff like wildfire. Some people whispered that James should be arrested. Others said it was just a tragic accident. The government officials who oversaw the facility were in constant emergency meetings, trying to figure out what this meant for human-alien relations. James wasn't allowed to leave. Not that he wanted to. He felt responsible, even though logic told him he couldn't have known. He spent his nights lying awake, replaying that moment over and over. The simple handshake, the friendly smile, 3 seconds that changed 2 lives forever. Zara refused to see him for 3 days. She communicated only with the medical staff and her fellow Viridian who had accompanied her. James heard through others that she was trying to find a way to terminate the pregnancy, but Viridian biology didn't work that way. Once conception occurred, their bodies protected the developing life with every resource available. Human medicine couldn't help either. The hybrid nature of the pregnancy made it impossible to predict what any intervention might do. On the 4th day, Zara finally agreed to speak with him again. This time her anger had cooled into something harder and colder. She looked at him with eyes that held nothing but resentment. "I was supposed to explore 5 planets," she told him. "This was my life's work. I trained for 20 Earth years to become an explorer. I gave up everything for this opportunity. And now, because of one moment with you, it's all gone. I'll be sent home. I'll become a mother instead of an explorer. Do you understand what you've taken from me?" James did understand. Not fully, perhaps, but enough to feel the weight of it crushing down on him. He apologized, knowing the words were inadequate. He offered to help in any way he could.
He promised to take full responsibility. Zara laughed bitterly.
Responsibility? What does that even mean in this situation? Will you carry this child for me? Will you give me back my life as it was? He couldn't answer. There was no answer that would make this right. As the days turned into weeks, the reality of the situation settled over everyone at the facility. Zara was stuck on Earth, at least until the pregnancy was resolved. James continued his work but found it impossible to focus. And between them hung this impossible situation, created in seconds but destined to impact the rest of their lives. The world outside the facility had no idea what was happening. But inside those walls, 2 people from different worlds were struggling to understand how a moment of innocent contact could create something so life-changing, and this was only the beginning. Communication with Viridian took days. The messages traveled across light years of space, each one carrying the weight of an unprecedented situation. When the response finally came, it wasn't what anyone hoped for. The Viridian Council was divided. Some members called for Zara to be brought home immediately. Others insisted she complete the pregnancy on Earth since human medical facilities were closer. A few radical voices even suggested this hybrid child could be an opportunity rather than a crisis. But nobody could agree on what should actually happen. James watched Zara receive this news through the observation window of her medical room. Even without hearing the conversation, he could see her shoulders slump with disappointment. She had hoped her people would rescue her from this situation. Instead, they had left her in limbo, alone on a foreign planet with a pregnancy nobody understood. The medical complications started in the 3rd week. Zara's body temperature spiked dangerously high. The hybrid fetus was developing faster than any Viridian pregnancy on record, and her system struggled to keep up. Human doctors consulted with the Viridian medical officer, but neither species had experience with anything like this. That's when James made a decision that surprised everyone, including himself. He requested permission to assist with Zara's care directly. He wasn't a medical doctor, but he was a biologist who specialized in cross-species compatibility. More importantly, he felt responsible for what had happened. The facility director initially refused. Zara certainly wanted nothing to do with him, but as her condition worsened and the medical team ran out of options, They reluctantly agreed to let James try. He would work under supervision, developing treatments based on what they knew about both human and Viridian biology. When they told Zara about this arrangement, her skin flashed dark red again. "Absolutely not," she said firmly. "I don't want him anywhere near me." "I understand," James replied through the communication system. He was standing outside her room, speaking through the intercom. "I know you hate me. You have every right to, but please let me help. I need to do something to make this right." "You can't make this right," Zara shot back. "Nothing will ever make this right. I know. But I can try to make it less wrong, please." There was a long silence. Finally, Zara spoke again, her voice tired. "Fine, but only because I have no other choice. Don't think this changes anything between us." So began the strangest partnership either of them had ever experienced. James spent 16 hours a day in the laboratory, analyzing Zara's biological readings and developing stabilizing treatments. Zara provided information about Viridian physiology, explaining how her body worked and what symptoms might indicate serious problems. They communicated mostly through written notes and occasional video calls. Face-to-face interaction was still too painful for both of them, but slowly, through necessity, they began to work together. James learned things about Viridian biology that amazed him. Their cells operated on a completely different energy system than human cells. Their DNA had a triple helix structure instead of a double helix, and their reproductive biology was so complex that he understood why pregnancy on their planet took a decade. The process involved hundreds of biological checkpoints that had to be carefully met. This hybrid pregnancy was skipping most of those checkpoints. The fetus was developing human-style speed with Viridian-style complexity. It shouldn't have been possible, yet it was happening. James worked frantically to develop supplements that would support both aspects of the pregnancy. During one late-night research session, Zara spoke to him through the video link. It was the first time she had initiated conversation. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. "Working these impossible hours, barely sleeping. Is it guilt?" James considered the question carefully. "Partly," he admitted, "but also because this child exists because of something I did. Even if it was an accident, I feel connected to what happens. I want them to have a chance at life." Zara was quiet for a moment. "On my planet, we don't have accidental pregnancies. Every child is chosen, planned for, prepared for. This is so chaotic." "Welcome to being human," James said with a tired smile. "We're kind of specialists in chaos." For the first time since the incident, Zara almost smiled. Almost. But the moment passed quickly, and the walls went back up between them. The facility became a pressure cooker of tension. Government officials demanded regular updates. Scientists from around the world wanted access to the data. Some religious groups heard rumors about what was happening and started protesting outside the facility gates, though they didn't know the full story. Through it all, James and Zara continued their uncomfortable partnership. He developed treatments. She tested them, reporting back on how her body responded. Slowly, impossibly, they stabilized the pregnancy. Zara's symptoms improved. The fetus continued developing, showing signs of both human and Viridian traits on the ultrasound. One evening, during a routine checkup, Zara asked to speak with James in person. It was the first time she had made such a request. He entered her room nervously, unsure what to expect. Zara was sitting by the window looking out at the desert sunset. The orange light made her bioluminescent skin glow warmly. "I need to tell you something," she said without looking at him. "I spoke with my family on Viridian today. They're disappointed in me. They think I should have been more careful, should have taken the suppression medication even though I didn't think I'd need it. They blame me as much as they blame you." James felt anger rise in his chest. "That's not fair. You couldn't have known." "Maybe, but on my planet we value caution above everything else. Taking risks is seen as irresponsible. I broke that fundamental rule by agreeing to physical contact without protection." She finally looked at him. "I've been so angry at you. But the truth is I'm angry at myself too, and at this situation, and at the universe for making our biologies compatible in the first place." "For what it's worth," James said quietly, "I would do anything to go back and change what happened. But since I can't, all I can do is try to help you through what comes next." Zara nodded slowly. "Your dedication hasn't gone unnoticed. The medical staff tells me you barely eat or sleep, that you've turned down offers to leave the facility. Why?" Because running away won't change what happened. And because regardless of how this child came to be, they deserve a chance. Both of us owe them that much. Something shifted in Zara's expression. Not forgiveness, not friendship, but perhaps the first hint of understanding. My people have a saying, she told him. The wind that destroys the old tree also plants the new seed. I don't know what that seed will grow into, but I suppose we're going to find out. It wasn't much, but it was the first time since that terrible handshake that they had spoken to each other as something other than victim and accuser. The anger was still there, probably would always be there to some degree, but underneath it a fragile foundation was beginning to form. They had months ahead of them before this pregnancy would end. Neither knew what would happen after that, but for the first time, they were facing the unknown together rather than from opposite sides of a wall. It was a small step, but in a situation this impossible, small steps were all they had. By the 8th week, the pregnancy had become stable enough that Zara could leave the medical wing for short periods. She spent most of her time in the observation dome, a glass-enclosed room on the facility's roof where she could see the stars. James often found her there late at night, staring up at the sky like she could see all the way home to Viridian. One night, he brought her a meal the kitchen staff had specially prepared, based on Viridian dietary requirements. She accepted it with a small nod of thanks, something that would have been unthinkable a few weeks earlier. Tell me about your planet, James said, sitting down at a respectful distance. You've been here for months now, but I realized I know almost nothing about where you come from. Zara was silent for so long that James thought she wouldn't answer. Then she began to speak, her voice taking on a distant quality. Viridian has 3 moons. When they align once every cycle, the entire sky lights up so bright you can read by it. We have forests made of crystal formations that sing when the wind passes through them. The sound carries for miles. My home city is built into the side of a mountain with buildings that spiral upward like a shell. It sounds beautiful, James said honestly. It is, or it was to me. Before I left, I spent every free moment memorizing it. I knew I would be gone for years, possibly decades. I wanted to carry it all with me. Her hand unconsciously moved to her abdomen, where the pregnancy was now visible as a small curve. I never imagined I would have to go back so soon, and under these circumstances. James wanted to say something comforting, but what comfort could he offer? Instead, he asked, what was it like growing up there? And slowly, carefully, Zara began to share pieces of her life. She told him about her childhood, about the school where she learned to navigate by the stars. She described her family, particularly her mother, who was a historian, and her father, who designed spacecraft. She explained the rigorous training she underwent to become an explorer, the years of preparation that led to her being chosen for this mission. In return, James shared his own story. Growing up in a small town, fascinated by science fiction and dreams of the stars, losing his mother to cancer when he was 16, working 3 jobs to put himself through university, the excitement when he got hired at this facility, thinking he would spend his career studying theoretical possibilities that might never materialize. And then I met you, he said quietly, and everything I thought I knew about the universe changed. Changed for both of us, Zara replied, a hint of bitterness still in her voice. But the sharp edge had dulled somewhat. These late-night conversations became a pattern. After the daily medical checkups and treatments, after the endless reports and meetings with officials, they would meet in the observation dome and talk. Not about the pregnancy, not about what happened, but about everything else. Movies and music, philosophy and mathematics, the differences between their species and the surprising similarities. James learned that Viridians had emotions just like humans, but they expressed them through skin color changes rather than facial expressions. Dark blue meant sadness. Bright yellow meant joy. Red meant anger, but pink meant embarrassment. Purple meant thoughtfulness. It was like learning to read an entirely new language written on her skin. Zara learned about human customs that seemed bizarre to her. Birthday celebrations, for instance. Why celebrate getting older? On Viridian, they celebrated achievements and milestones, not arbitrary points in a calendar cycle. She found human music chaotic and beautiful in equal measure, and she was completely baffled by the concept of reality television. During one conversation, Zara asked James if he had ever wanted children. The question caught him off guard. I don't know, he admitted. I never really thought about it seriously. My work was always my priority, and I never met someone I could imagine building that kind of life with. And now you're going to be a father anyway, Zara said, to a child that is both human and Viridian, a child that will never fully belong to either world. The weight of that reality hung between them. James had been so focused on helping Zara through the pregnancy that he hadn't let himself think much about what came after. But there would be a child, a living being with his genetic material and Zara's, combining two species that had evolved light years apart. I'm terrified, James confessed. I have no idea how to be a father, especially to a child like this. I'm terrified too, Zara admitted. Her skin shifted to a pale blue that James now recognized as sadness mixed with fear. On my planet, parents have years to prepare. They study child rearing. They join community groups. They plan every detail. I have none of that. And this child will grow up so much faster than a Viridian child should. Maybe, James suggested carefully. We don't have to figure it all out alone. Maybe we can help each other. Zara looked at him, really looked at him for the first time in weeks. You're suggesting we work together. As parents, I'm suggesting we do what's best for this child, whatever that looks like. I know I'm the last person you want to be tied to. But we're both going to be part of this kid's life. We might as well try to do it in a way that doesn't make things harder for them. It wasn't a declaration of friendship or forgiveness. It was practical, pragmatic. But Zara nodded slowly. On my planet, we have a concept called shared navigation. It's what happens when two ships traveling the same route decide to coordinate their journey. They're not together, but they're not alone either. They share information, help each other avoid dangers, and arrive at the destination more safely than they would have separately. Shared navigation, James repeated. I like that. Their partnership began to shift after that conversation. It was still tense sometimes, and Zara's anger hadn't completely disappeared. But they started making decisions together about the pregnancy and what would happen after. They discussed whether the child should be raised on Earth or Viridian, eventually deciding they would need to split time between both worlds. They talked about names, about education, about how to help a hybrid child understand their dual heritage. The scientific world outside the facility was desperate for information about the pregnancy. James and Zara agreed to publish some basic data, but they kept the personal details private. They weren't a research project. They were two people trying to navigate an impossible situation as best they could. Around the 12th week during a routine ultrasound, they saw something that stopped them both cold. The baby moved, a small flutter visible on the screen. It was real. Not just data and biological readings, but a tiny being with arms and legs, already developing features that looked like a blend of both species. Zara's skin flashed through multiple colors rapidly. Something James had learned meant she was experiencing complex, conflicting emotions. Tears formed in her eyes, something he hadn't known Viridians could do. I see them, she whispered. I see our child, our child. It was the first time she had used that word. Not just her child or the child, but theirs. James felt something crack open in his chest, a feeling he couldn't quite name, wonder and terror and responsibility all mixed together. They left the medical room together that day, walking side by side. Not friends, perhaps. Not exactly partners. But two people on a shared navigation through uncharted territory, doing their best to reach a destination neither had chosen, but both were committed to finding. The pregnancy continued. Complications arose and were managed. Zara's body adapted in ways that fascinated and terrified the medical staff. And through it all, the bond between Zara and James grew stronger, built not on romance or forgiveness, but on mutual respect and shared purpose. They were going to be parents. The how and why didn't matter anymore. What mattered was the tiny life depending on both of them to figure this out. And slowly, impossibly, they were learning how to do exactly that. The day came suddenly, 3 weeks earlier than the doctors predicted. James was in the laboratory reviewing some data when the emergency alarm went off. His heart dropped into his stomach even before someone shouted that Zara had gone into labor. He ran to the medical wing, his mind racing through everything that could go wrong. The pregnancy had been stable for weeks, but they all knew that the birth itself was the most dangerous part. No one had ever delivered a human Viridian hybrid before. They didn't know what to expect. Zara was already in the delivery room, surrounded by medical staff from both species. Her skin was flashing between colors so rapidly it was almost strobing, indicating intense physical and emotional stress. When she saw James, she reached out her hand, and without thinking, he took it. "Don't leave," she said, gripping his hand tightly. "I know we're not. I know what we are and what we aren't, but please don't leave." "I'm not going anywhere," James promised. What followed were the longest 6 hours of James's life. The labor was difficult and dangerous, exactly as they had feared. Zara's body, designed for a decade-long pregnancy, was trying to deliver a child after less than 5 months. The hybrid nature of the baby made everything unpredictable. Several times the monitors showed dangerous vital signs, and James watched the medical team scramble to stabilize the situation. He stayed by Zara's side through all of it, holding her hand, speaking to her in the Viridian phrases he had learned over the past months. She squeezed his hand so hard he thought his bones might break, but he didn't let go. At one point, when things looked particularly dire, she looked at him with fear in her eyes. "If something happens to me," she said between contractions, "promise me you'll take care of them. Promise me you'll teach them about both worlds. Promise me they'll know where they came from." "Nothing's going to happen to you," James said firmly, even though he wasn't sure if that was true. "You're going to be fine, and we're going to raise this kid together just like we planned." As dawn broke through the windows of the medical room, the baby finally came. One more push, one more moment of desperate effort, and suddenly there was a new sound in the room. A cry, small and strong and unmistakably alive. The medical staff moved quickly, checking vital signs and making sure everything was functioning properly. James couldn't see much through the crowd of doctors, but he heard them murmuring in amazement. "Stable," someone said. "Both cardiovascular systems functioning. Skin shows bioluminescent properties. All fingers and toes present." Then they placed the baby in Zara's arms, and James saw his daughter for the first time. She was beautiful. Impossibly, miraculously beautiful. Her skin had a soft glow to it like Zara's, but with warmer human undertones. Her eyes, when they opened, were dark like James's, but slightly larger and more expressive. She had 10 tiny fingers and 10 tiny toes, a shock of dark hair that seemed to shimmer slightly in the light. She looked like both of them, and like neither of them. She looked entirely her own person. "Hello, little one," Zara whispered, her voice full of wonder. Her skin had shifted to a soft golden color, something James had never seen before. When he asked about it later, she told him it was the color of profound joy, mixed with overwhelming love. A color that only appeared during the most precious moments of a Viridian's life. James couldn't speak. He could only stare at this tiny being that somehow carried pieces of him, mixed with pieces of someone from a planet light years away. When Zara looked up at him, there were tears running down her face. "We made a person," she said, sounding as amazed as James felt. "Despite everything that went wrong, despite how this started, we made a person. She's perfect," James managed to say, his own voice thick with emotion. "They named her Lyra, after a constellation visible from both Earth and Viridian. A star shared by 2 worlds, just like she was." The next few days were chaos. Lyra was healthy, but she needed careful monitoring. Her dual biology meant she had 2 cardiovascular systems, one human and one Viridian, working together in a configuration no one had seen before. She needed both human nutrition and Viridian dietary supplements. Her sleep cycle didn't match either species. But she was alive, she was growing, and she was theirs. James barely left the medical wing. He watched Lyra sleep, studied every expression that crossed her tiny face, marveled at the way her skin would glow faintly when she dreamed. Zara recovered from the birth faster than human doctors expected, but slower than Viridian doctors hoped for, somewhere in between like everything else about this situation. The world outside the facility finally learned the full truth when James and Zara released a joint statement. The news exploded across the planet. Some people called Lyra a miracle, proof that different species could coexist and create something beautiful together. Others called her an abomination, a violation of natural law. Religious leaders debated what her existence meant. Scientists clamored for access to study her. Through it all, James and Zara ignored the noise. Their focus was on the small bundle in the medical crib, on learning how to feed her and change her and comfort her when she cried. They took turns staying awake during the night, both afraid to leave her alone even though she was surrounded by medical staff. 1 week after Lyra's birth, government officials from both Earth and Viridian demanded a meeting. They wanted to discuss Lyra's future, Who had custody? Where would she be raised? What rights did each planet have regarding the first human-alien hybrid? James and Zara sat across from a table full of politicians and lawyers, with Lyra sleeping in Zara's arms. They listened to proposals and arguments and legal theories. Earth's representatives wanted Lyra raised on Earth, under human law. Viridian's representatives insisted she belonged on their planet, learning Viridian culture. Some suggested she should be studied extensively. Others proposed splitting her time exactly in half. Finally, Zara stood up, her skin flashing dark red. "Enough," she said firmly. "You're talking about my daughter like she's property to be divided up. She's not a political tool or a scientific specimen. She's a child." James stood beside her. "We'll raise her together, splitting time between both worlds. She'll learn both cultures, both languages, both ways of understanding the universe. She's not just human or just Viridian. She's both. And that's what makes her special. And if you try to take her from us," Zara continued, "if you try to use her for political advantage or lock her in a laboratory, you'll regret it. I may be far from home, but I am still a Viridian explorer. We do not surrender easily." The officials blustered and argued, but James and Zara stood firm. Eventually, perhaps because the alternative was an interplanetary incident, the officials agreed. Lyra would split her time between Earth and Viridian. She would have dual citizenship in both worlds, and her parents, not governments or scientists, would make decisions about her life. That night, back in their quarters, Zara and James sat together with Lyra between them. The anger that had defined their early relationship seemed like a distant memory now. They weren't romantic partners, and they probably never would be. The foundation of their relationship was too complicated for that. But they were partners in the truest sense. Two people committed to raising a child together, despite coming from different worlds. "I don't forgive you," Zara said quietly, breaking the comfortable silence. "I want you to know that. What happened, how Lyra came to be, it still hurts. It always will hurt. You took away my choice even if you didn't mean to." "I know," James replied. "I understand." "But," Zara continued, looking down at their sleeping daughter, "I'm grateful for this. For her. And I'm grateful that you've worked so hard to make this situation better than it could have been. You could have walked away. Many humans would have. But you stayed. I'll always stay," James promised. "Whatever you need, whatever Lyra needs, I'll be here." They sat in silence after that, watching Lyra sleep. She made small sounds, her skin glowing softly in the dim light. She was a miracle and a mistake, wanted and unwanted, planned and accidental. She was proof that even when everything goes wrong, something beautiful can still emerge. And she was loved fiercely and completely by two parents who never chose each other but chose her every single day. 6 months after Lyra's birth, James found himself in a small apartment near the facility, watching his daughter try to crawl. She wasn't quite there yet. Her movements still uncoordinated, but she was determined. That determination, he was learning, came from both sides of her heritage. Zara sat beside him on the floor, her skin shifting to soft pink, as Lyra managed to move forward a few inches before toppling over. "She's going to be mobile soon," Zara said. "Are we ready for that?" "Absolutely not," James replied with a grin. "But I don't think that's going to stop her." Their living arrangement was unconventional, but it worked. The facility had provided them with a specially designed home that accommodated both human and Viridian needs. James and Zara had separate bedrooms but shared common spaces. They had developed a rhythm over the past months, learning each other's habits and quirks. It wasn't always easy, but they made it work. Lyra was thriving in ways that constantly surprised the medical team. She displayed abilities from both species. Her skin could change color like Zara's, though not as dramatically. She was developing faster than Viridian children, but slower than human children, somewhere in between. She responded to both spoken language and Viridian color communication, and she was curious about everything, constantly exploring her world with wide, intelligent eyes. James had become an advocate for interspecies understanding, something he never expected. He gave lectures about what they had learned from Lyra's existence. He wrote papers about the importance of informed consent across cultural boundaries and the need for better protocols as humans made contact with more alien species. His work at the facility shifted from pure research to helping develop safety guidelines that would prevent accidents like the one that created Lyra. Zara had found her own purpose in this unexpected situation. She couldn't be an explorer anymore, at least not in the way she had planned, but she had become something perhaps more important, a bridge between species. She worked with both Viridian and human governments, helping them understand each other better. She gave talks about Viridian culture and corrected the many misconceptions humans had about her people. One evening, while Lyra slept in her specially designed crib, Zara and James sat on the balcony of their apartment, looking up at the stars. It was something they did often, a quiet ritual that had become important to both of them. "I had a conversation with my mother today," Zara said. "She wants to meet Lyra," she said. "She said she's sorry for how she reacted initially. She wants to be part of her granddaughter's life." "That's good," James said. "Lyra should know her family on both sides." My mother also said something else. She said that what happened to me, what happened to us, is becoming a teaching story on Viridian. They're using it to help young Viridians understand the importance of being careful when exploring new species, but also to understand that accidents can happen, and how we respond to those accidents matters more than the accidents themselves. James thought about that. "Is that okay with you? Being a cautionary tale?" Zara considered the question carefully. "I think so. If our story helps prevent this from happening to someone else, then maybe some good came from it. And it's not just a cautionary tale. It's